Let's turn now to the liturgy real quick. I'll just be short and to the point. I'll read one verse. I was going to read two, but we'll just read one, and then next week we'll read two verses, and then the week after that we'll read all four. Isaiah 2 verse 3. Remember 2 weeks ago we read 1 and 2. So we're reading about this promise of future Israel, that one day leading up to this idea that Israel will be brought into prominence once again. God's going to establish his kingdom here on earth in Jerusalem, and eventually we're going to read how the Torah is going to go forth and minister not just to Israel but to the surrounding nations. It's that whole eschatological view of Israel that we talked about in Romans study, particularly Romans chapter 15. Go back and listen to the study if you missed it. But Isaiah says in the English, "And many people shall come and say, 'Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord.'" Who? Many peoples, not just Jews. In the end times, many peoples shall come and say. So this fits right in again with the Abrahamic promises, right in again with the Shema theology. God is the one God of Israel and of the many peoples, the nations, the Amim Rabim, we're going to see in the Hebrew. Many people shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to where? Let's go to Salt Lake City. Let's go to the Vatican Square." No, that's not where they're going to go. Where are they going to go? They're going to go to the mountain of the Lord. They're going to go to Jerusalem. Why? Because God's concentrated presence is there in the midst of the people of Israel. The people from the nations are going to gather there. Let's go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. Right? Keep in mind that it's the nations being brought into proximity to worship God in the midst of Israel, not separated from Israel. We don't have this bilateral ecclesiology where we got Jews over on one side and Gentiles over the other side, and they're separated, but they're both worshiping God somehow. No, that's not how Paul sees it. That's not how the prophets see it. Eventually, we become one big family of God. Let's go to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways. What ways do you think he's talking about? I think he's talking about the Torah. We'll have to wait till next week to read it in verse 4. That he may teach us his ways, and that may we walk in his paths. No, we're going to read about it now. "For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." So yeah, we're going to read it right now. We don't have to wait till next week to read it. Let's read it right now. So we see that this is a future passage where, far from envisioning that the Torah has been done away with by the death of Messiah, sounds like the Torah is still relevant to not only to God's people, but to the surrounding people groups who are coming into proximity to God and to God's people here in Jerusalem that day. Let's read the Hebrew over on the right side of the page over here. The Hebrew says, "V'halhu amim rabim." The amim rabim is the many peoples. "V'halhu amim rabim, v'amru lehu, v'na'ale el har Adonai el beit Elohei Yaakov, v'yorenu midrachaiv, v'nelcha ba'orchotaiv." Why? Ki, let's walk in this path. Why? Ki, because Ki mitzion Tetze Torah, the Torah shall go forth. U devar, and the word Adonai, mi Yerushalayim, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. This, by the way, is where I get the name of my ministry. The Tetze Torah right here. Tetze Torah is the name of my ministry, and it's taken directly from this verse out of Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3. The Torah shall go forth from Jerusalem, and then we have, poetically speaking, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. The law shall go forth from Zion. What's the law? It's the word of the Lord. What's the word of the Lord? It's the law. So the parallelism is the Davar Adonai is the Torah itself. So the same thing. So that'll do it for our liturgy from the Hebrew. Let's turn to the Greek. We've looked at this in the past. We'll keep working down through this. Galatians chapter 2, challenging passages for those who think that the law has been done away with. How can Paul say the law has been done away with? But at the same time, how do we fit in the idea that the law is still relevant when Paul says that it's something that we can't attain salvation by? Dropping down to Galatians 2, we read verse. I think we read 15 and 16 2 weeks ago. So let's read 2 verses tonight, 17 and 18. In English it says, "But if in our endeavor to be justified in Christ, we too were found to be sinners, and is Christ then a servant of sin? Certainly not." In verse 18, For if I rebuild what I tore down, I prove myself to be a transgressor. Paul is speaking largely to Gentiles who are entertaining the idea of joining national Israel at the ethnic level, at the legal Jewish status level, which would clear up any confusion that the Torah is for Jews or for Gentiles. In Paul's day, national Israel believed that the Torah was for Jews only, and therefore if Gentiles wanted to join the people group of God, they had to convert and become Jews, legally speaking. But Paul sees this as a stumbling block to the gospel because it forces a Gentile to place his faith in his ethnicity and his legal status and his belonging to a people group rather than placing his faith in Messiah. And so Paul sees this as a counterfeit gospel. It's works righteousness, it's legalism to place your trust in your ethnicity. He certainly wasn't accusing Israel of placing their trust in their Torah obedience like the church levels that charge against Israel today. What he was chastising national Israel for was the blindness caused by their ethnocentric Jewish exclusivism. He wasn't really chastising them for their loyalty to Torah, just their misguided use of Jewish identity, which led to following the Torah. So let's read the Greek over on the right side of the page. The Greek says, "E de zetuntes dikaiothena in Christo euthemen. Kai autoi hamartoloi ara Christos hamartias diakonos me genoita." And verse 18 says, "Egar ha katalusa tauta palin oikadamo parabatain hiauton sunestano." And that'll be the Greek for tonight.